Hey everyone, I'm Scott Brandley.
And I'm Alicia Coakley.
Every member of the church has a story to share, one that can instill faith, invite growth, and inspire others.
On today's episode, we're going to hear how faith to save a child's life, a fight against mounting medical expenses, and the unexpected support from ward and community members helped one couple decide to be all in the gospel. Welcome to Latter-day Lights.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. We have another amazing episode for you of Latter-day Lights. Today we have DawnMarie Peterson, and we're super excited to have you, Dawn. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So, funny story, DawnMarie, she actually works with me in primary, and a couple Sundays ago, I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden I get this really strong feeling, you need to go ask DawnMarie to be a guest on the show. And I thought, I don't even know any of DawnMarie's stories. I hadn't heard her, speak in the sacrament about anything in particular. We haven't had a chance to really get to know each other that well outside of primary. And so I was just like, I don't really know what she has to say, but it was so strong that I was like, okay, I heard you. I'm going to go. And I asked her and she was just like, sure. What do you want me to talk about? So it took a few days and she kind of came up with a story. And then when she was going over just a brief summary of it, I was getting chills. I was just like, oh my gosh, I love this story. This is the reason why she needed to be on the show. And so I'm very, very excited to hear all of the extra details. I'm excited for our guests or our listeners to be able to hear all the details. Scott, you don't even know what this is about, do you, really?
Nope.
You know, this much of it, right? So it's going to be a surprise to all of us.
Yeah. My husband said my fault is that I'm a yes girl, and so here we go.
Yeah, it's hard to say no to Alicia sometimes, that's for sure.
Because of my charming personality, not because I'm pushy.
Yeah, right. So, DawnMarie, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I was born and raised in Elko, Nevada, and I like to refer to Elko, Nevada, especially the time when I was growing up, as kind of the Wild West, and have some fun little facts of growing up in Elko. I came from a family, I'm the oldest of 6 children, and my dad he was a wonderful man, and he is currently in a nursing home and has Alzheimer's, but he is one of my heroes in life. They had a basketball program at our college here when it first began, and he was asked to be the basketball coach. And so I grew up in this house of 3 bedrooms, 1 bath, and he recruited 2 boys named Benny and Bosco, who are African Americans, from Salt Lake to come and play on his team. And he was sure they were going to start winning some games, but he had to offer him a full ride scholarship. And so he gave our pretty pink room with trundle bed, my sister and I's room, to Benny and Bosco. So we had 5, my mom was pregnant with our 6, but we had 5 kids in 1 room, bunk beds, Benny and Bosco in another room, and my parents. So I had come from very humble beginnings. And then this beautiful home in Elko went up for sale, and I just loved it. And I told my dad, I wish we could buy that house. It was a much bigger house. I didn't realize, because I was a young girl, that home had been a prostitute home. I don't know what you call that.
A brothel.
A brothel, thank you. I don't use that term often. But a brothel in the middle of Elko in the tree streets. There were a couple of them. Yes. And the citizens of Elko did not like the fact that they were living next door to brothels. And so they passed a law that they would have to move to 3rd Street. And so this house went for sale and no one was buying it. Well, it had been on the market for so long that one night we heard an explosion. It woke us all up, but that house caught on fire and blew up. Okay. And we're pretty sure that was for insurance purposes. But my dad had this great idea that he was going to buy that house. We were going to gut it and have a place for all of us to live. It had 6 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms.
Oh.
And so my childhood, my 6th grade year was spent going to school and then coming home and helping tear down like sheetrock. And I remember blowing my nose, it would be all black because everything was burned.
Oh, yeah.
But we had a fun childhood, and I don't know if we ever really got that house totally complete, but it was a fun project that we all worked on together, and there's some Elko history for you too.
So you grew up in a brothel.
In a brothel, but my dad said it was cleansed by the fire. And I think he was right.
Ah, nice.
Yeah.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
With that introduction, why don't you tell us your story?
Okay, so this is part of my introduction also. I am married and have 5 children. I married a local boy also, and his family was a part member family. And when they moved to Elko, they had moved here from LA, California. His mom was the only member that was going to church, and she was taking these 4 little children. And my dad was assigned as their home teacher. And he could tell that we were going to be great friends. We all were about the same age as their kids, and we did become fast friends with their family. And my father-in-law tells me that this was back in the days when priesthood was first thing in the morning. Then you went home, and then you had Sunday school and sacrament in the evening. But my dad would go by the house every Sunday morning, my father-in-law's house, bright and early for priesthood, and he'd honk the horn twice, and he'd just wait. And my father-in-law would always wave to him out the window and just say, "Go on," But my dad did that for a long time. And my mother-in-law brought over some papers of my husband's just to she was cleaning out her house. And one of them was his paper that he had been ordained a deacon. And I didn't even remember this or know this, but my dad was the one that performed that ordinance.
That's cool.
And so
Wow.
I just really am thankful for home teachers.
That's
and
awesome.
for that. Now it's ministry.
Right.
Yeah. He had no idea that would become my future husband, but
Aw.
he took that calling seriously and did a great job at it. Thankful for that. So my husband and I were married, and
So
we
cool.
had a daughter who was about 4 years old, and then we had a son born to us. And at the time, my husband had been working in the mines, and we'd been socking away money for a down payment on a business, and he had gone to several banks and tried to convince them to invest and give us a loan for an oil change business. And it took us about 3 or 4 years from the time he started this to get all the funding. His dad became a partner with us. He convinced his dad to do that. And so we had just opened up a new business in town. And our son was born about the same time. Well, he was born a few months before we opened up the business. And then we found out when he was 9 months old that, he had gone into cardiac arrest and kidney failure, and he was life flighted from Elko. And I had him to the doctor several times. I knew he wasn't thriving. Something was wrong. I remember the doctor telling me, "Mrs. Peterson, babies will cry." And I had one baby and several other children, and I knew this. I knew that babies would cry. I was a little upset with her, but finally they did a blood test right before they life flighted us and found out what was going on. And we were immediately put on a plane, and naturally it was the worst storm of the year. Tons of snow. They had to defrost the wings. It took us quite a while to get off the ground. My husband jumped in his car with our 4-year-old daughter, I guess, and drove to Salt Lake. They were waiting for us at Primary Children's and had been there about an hour before we even got there. But we flew over, landed, and then we had to take an ambulance to Primary Children's. And on the airplane ride, his blood pressure was so high, they were afraid he was going to have a major stroke. So they gave him half of a pill of blood pressure medicine to try to bring down his blood pressure. And it brought it down so fast that he had a little heart attack. Not a little, he had a heart attack on the plane. His heart went into failure. And my husband had given him a blessing with his father right before we left. But on the airplane, I just remember seeing his eyes, seeing the nurses in panic. And so I just laid my hands on his head and I just started praying also. And I just left him there and just prayed till we landed. And we got into Salt Lake. And I remember my husband's big question to the doctors is this little boy going to live? Is he going to make it? And they wouldn't ever answer us. They wouldn't say yes or no. But they said, we'll do all we can for him. And long story short, he was in the hospital that first time for about a month. And we got caught between insurances. It was a pre-existing condition. They decided that he was born with it and a birth defect that didn't get caught. And we would have had insurance at the mines, but of course we had left the mines. And so insurances weren't picking up the cost of that. My father's dad, who is our business partner, decided that the best thing he could do is leave and go to work somewhere else. And he told my husband, maybe you need to just close this business down. And he wasn't trying to be mean. He was saying, I don't think there's any way you're going to be able to afford taking care of this child and not having insurance. You need to go back to the mines. And my husband didn't want to do that. And he persevered through that time. And there were many miracles that came to us. I had a preschool and about 40 students and 4 teachers that I employed. And I shut that down because the baby couldn't be around other kids. And I just was overwhelmed with taking care of him. We couldn't afford to have a home nurse come in. So I learned how to take care of this baby, do his feeding tubes and his weigh all his diapers, keep records of things. And he was hospitalized a couple more times.
And DawnMarie, what is it that was wrong with your son? And this is Colton, right?
Yes, his name's Colton. So he had what was called a posterior urethral valve, and we have tubes from our kidneys to our bladder. Our kidneys filter, and then the bladder empties. And the valve in one of those tubes was not opening. It was sealed shut. And that was a birth defect. And so all the urine had backed up, destroyed one of his kidneys. He ended up losing a kidney and damaging the other kidney. It damaged his bladder. They didn't have real high hopes of him being able to have children. They weren't sure how much damage was done. And they tell you the worst. They said he'd never be potty trained. He'd never, be able to function in a normal setting as other children do. But my husband, so this is where we had been active members in the church. My husband didn't serve a mission. He chose to marry me. I'm a little bit older than he is. He chose to get married at 19. And so this was our first big challenge in life. And this is where our testimonies were really challenged. Are we going to turn towards our Heavenly Father or away from him? And I'm sorry to say that I was the one that struggled the most. I thought Heavenly Father maybe was punishing me for something maybe I did in my past, or that I wasn't a perfect person. And I soon, through prayer and just understanding the gospel more, realized that isn't how our Heavenly Father works. He doesn't punish us for things. We have consequences, but that wasn't a consequence. This had nothing to do with consequences. This was a trial, and we're all given trials. And in our married life and throughout my life, I've been given many more trials, and some of them just as hard as this. And I have close friends and family that have had harder trials. And I've decided, we're given these trials for us to grow closer to our Heavenly Father and to learn to be like him, to turn towards him. And I've sadly seen family members and loved ones that have chosen to turn away from him, and the difference that makes. But my husband knew from the very beginning that this was a trial and that it would test, and that we needed to learn something from it. And he immediately started fasting.
Okay.
And you really don't need to do more than a 24-hour fast, but he would fast one day and then he'd just pray. He gave that baby many blessings in the hospital. He had to go back to Elko and work that business. And so he left me there in Salt Lake. And at the time, we didn't have any family there except for my one younger brother who was going to BYU, and he had just gotten married. My husband didn't think to bring me any clothes or anything. And he had to go home. So for 2 weeks, I had no clothes because he didn't come back. And I didn't dare leave that hospital room and that baby because I was afraid if I left, something would happen. And so my sweet sister-in-law brought up a couple of her outfits. And there was a little sweet nurse at the hospital, a volunteer nurse, that came around and took my dirty clothes and took them home. She washed them. I even had a hole in one of my clothing. She sewed it up for me. Just sweet things like this. Just all along the way happened to us. We had a bishop that was aware of our situation. And they say, go to your family first for help financially. And neither one of our family members were able to help us at the time. And so we depended a lot on the Lord and on fast offerings and our bishop and the feeding tubes, the machines and equipment we had to bring home. Fast offerings helped with those. And we've been able to, throughout our lives now, pay that back through our fast offerings. But it was there when we needed it. And what a blessing that was.
Wow.
Our bishop. What a great man. He, about 2 months after we were home from the hospital, he called my husband as the Elders Quorum president. And that was the first, big calling he'd had in the church, and he did great. But he was aware of our needs, and a year after we brought our son home, it was time to take the one kidney out that had been destroyed. And he had gotten healthy enough that they could do that. And I knew that I was going to be over there with him in that hospital room, and I was going to have to buy my meals down in the cafeteria. And money was just so tight. Every penny went towards the needs of this child and bills and things that were happening. I had to close my preschool and that income. But immediately the bishop said, we have missionaries that need housing. And if you'd be willing to turn that preschool into housing for the missionaries, that might help with your income. And it did help a little bit. And it was a blessing. So just things like that all along the way. But
wow,
one Sunday, it came between, okay, we're getting ready for this surgery. I'm going to have to be in the hospital with him. We thought it would be a couple weeks. It ended up only being a few days, and he was ready to come home. But I was worried that, how am I going to eat? We don't have extra money for me to go buy meals in the cafeteria. And I told my husband, when we get back from the surgery, we need to pay our tithing. But I think I'm going to use this money we have right here that was put aside for tithing to have some meals in the hospital. And my husband just said, we've got to have faith. We need every blessing we can have. And I think if we pay our tithing, things will go smoothly. And we just got to have that faith. And man, I'm glad I had him, because I probably wouldn't have chosen to do that. Give up meals and knowing that, So I wrote the check out and put it in an envelope that Sunday. Monday, we were leaving to the hospital. Years later, my husband was made a bishop, and he said, bishops never see the tithing. The counselors deal with the tithing. And the reason I mention this is because about a half hour after church, we get a knock on our door, and here comes the bishop. And he said, our family has decided that we want to help you guys. We know you're going in for surgery, and we just have a little something here we want to give you. And he left, and he handed me an envelope, and I opened that envelope, and it was the same exact amount that I'd written my tithing check for.
Oh my goodness.
And it was in cash, and just such a blessing to us.
Wow.
I tried to pay the bishop back years later when we were stronger on our feet, and he wouldn't accept it. He said, go help someone else with it. And we've been able to do that. I'm thankful for that. A lot of lessons were learned early. My husband has always conducted his life in a manner that he could give a blessing at any time. That's one thing he always wants to be prepared for, because that caught him off guard. He was ready. He was a good guy. This has made him a great man. And just be ready for that at any time, to use your priesthood. And I'm thankful for that. That's made all the difference in raising our family and our kids.
So I'm guessing the surgery went well.
So once they took the kidney that had been totally destroyed out and his urethra tube, he started doing great. He got off the feeding tube. He didn't have the infections he had. They told me that when he hit puberty, he'd probably need to have a transplant. That would be really a hard time on his body. And my husband had given him many blessings, and he just said, it's not going to happen. He's going to be fine. And I sometimes would get frustrated, but he had that faith, and he is now 30 years old. He has one kidney, and it's functioning right now at 30%. And he will need to have a transplant at some point.
Wow.
And we think that his sister he has one sister that matches up his blood type and everything really good. And so the story is yet to be written on what exactly happens, but that little boy had a purpose, and he needed to stay here. And he was the reason that his parents got their act all the way together, and that we became all in the gospel. And he's done missionary work. He's brought some friends to the gospel that have been baptized, and one in particular, named Ryan Eldridge, he picked up at the lake one day. He had our boat out on the lake, and this boy was broke down on a jet ski, and he brought him home. This boy had been used to jumping from house to house and living on friends' couches. He had graduated from high school, and his grandma kind of said, you're on your own. His grandma had been raising him. So he knew how to just fit into a family. And about a week after being at our home, my son comes up and he says, he's asking for closet space, and I'm not giving him any of mine, Colton said. And so I moved him into our office. This is another long story, but he went on a mission to Mexico, speaks great Spanish, came home and is a business partner now with Colton in American Fork at a big old tire store. And just his children call us Mimi and Papa. They're part of our grandkids, and which we also have 9 grandkids. Oh, so, yeah.
You know what I love about it is, you mentioned that, like, this is your story, but it's also Colton's story, right? You mentioned that he had a purpose even at this little tiny age of 9 months old. He had this purpose that has turned into this huge thing. And I know that when we were talking briefly about your story earlier, you had mentioned that, you did get the help from the church, from fast offerings and stuff. Of course, the nurse that was helping you out, your sister-in-law that helped you out by giving you some clothes. But how much further did that go? Because you also mentioned even the community came together, right?
This is true. So we'd opened up that lube center, and we were doing about 12 cars a day. It wasn't real catching the world on fire. And that's when my father-in-law said, I'm going to leave because this isn't going to be able to support both of us, and get a different job. And the community, we both were raised here, and many of them knew our story and our plight. And our business just exploded. It just, from members and non-members alike, we went from doing 12 cars a day to 40 easy, and had lines up around the block, and just stayed busy all the time. And then 40 went to even more. And we just felt the love of mankind and of this community. And that has been such a blessing to us. We've just been so grateful to be here and to be part of this area and to personally benefit from the blessings of good people. And, I had a girlfriend that when this happened, I was working on quilting a little quilt for my son. She came over to the house just to check on things and she saw that laying there and she finished it for me. So when we came home from the hospital, that was done. And we had meals and we just had lots of prayers. We felt all the prayers and fasting. It was a very humbling time for us. And I'm glad that that happened 5 years into our marriage, that we could get started on the right foot. And, if it would have happened at any other time, we probably wouldn't have been as needy. Sometimes I wish I wouldn't have been as needy, but it was so good to be humble and to know how it felt to need the help of others so that now I can be helpful maybe and pass that along.
I agree with that. And I think when you once you've felt that in your life, you have that natural desire to pass it forward, pay it forward in other people's lives, and that can be really fulfilling as a person.
It is fulfilling.
Yeah, just from knowing you just on this call. I mean, we've never met before, but you just seem like that kind of person. I'm sure you do a lot of things that people don't ever know about. That you know those little those little things to pay it forward and help others.
So in the scriptures it says don't let the right hand know what the left hand's doing or vice versa, right? I mean, we're
Right.
not supposed to make our good deeds known really. I mean, that's not what it's about, right?
Right.
But I have to tell you, we've raised our children with these stories. He was our second child and we've had five altogether, but our children have been the best missionaries and they have brought home kids to us and we have had success in baptisms, and it's all been youth who have lived tough lives where they have been in search of
Mhm.
something more, and they recognize it when they come into our home and what we have had from living the gospel. And I'm just so thankful that my children uh, have not been bashful to share that. They've just embraced that. Um,
Mhm.
sometimes they've shared it and it hasn't been successful or a good thing, but for the most part, it's been wonderful. And we've opened our home up to other children that have come and lived with us and been part of our family and continue to be.
Yeah.
And um, it is very rewarding.
Well, and I mean, I don't want to assume, but I guess I can ask, do you feel like being in that position, and I don't know why when you were talking about your story earlier, and then just again, this is just kind of like really like coming to my mind, but do you feel like being in that position of needing to be the person who receives the blessings, especially financially, right? I know there are a lot of people who get stuck in hard circumstances where they have to go and they have to talk to bishop, or maybe they rely on government assistance or something like that. And I know that there's been times in my life where, when I had leukemia, it was $15,000 a month was for the medication that I needed in order to live. And if it wasn't for both my insurance and especially for like the cancer foundation and for the donations that went to the cancer foundation, I don't even know how we would have I don't think I would have been here today. Like that's a lot of money to be able to come up with. So I remember thinking about all of these, like, I don't want to go ask the bishop for help. I almost felt embarrassed, right? Which obviously not many people can afford $15,000 a month medication, but I had that fear of I don't want to be the person that has to go ask for help. I don't want to be the person that applies for any type of disability from the government. I was just so um I don't know, like ashamed, I guess, which is just silly. I shouldn't have been, but that's the feelings that I had at the time. Yeah. So how hard was that? And do you feel like because you got to be the person who was asking that now it makes it easier for you to give, and does it also kind of put the responsibility on your shoulders to be more self-reliant, especially financially?
Yeah, that's huge for us. Um, yeah, that humility, I was very prideful. Like, I never wanted growing up people to think that we came from a poor family, but we really had tough circumstances. My dad was a geologist, and he had these mining claims, and he knew they were valuable, but that's about all he had. He had a mining company with a few claims, and he just hoped someday they would turn into something big. And they did. Those of you who are in Elko know Leeville, and he had that property and was able to get some royalties. I mean, now he could have helped us. Back then, we had nothing. Timing is everything. And there's no coincidences in the gospel, I have found. The Lord wanted us to go through this. He wanted us to be humbled. Yeah, like I said, I've served in so many different positions in the church, and my husband has also that understanding of what others are going through, and feeling for them. I know I just had a granddaughter baptized yesterday, my first granddaughter that turned 8, and we take upon ourselves the burdens of others. That's part of our baptismal covenant. And I was reminded of that yesterday. And I think that's been easier for us as a family to understand and be kinder and have more humility for others, because we had to go through that ourselves. Definitely. But yeah, lots of programs. Primary Children's pitched in and helped us. I mean, we're in a bad spot. I mean, give to Primary Children's. They're wonderful, We had a lot of assistance from the state. I mean, we had life flights to pay for, and like I said, all the equipment and just the surgeries. And so it was for a young couple who got caught without insurance. It was going to do us in. It was going to be, the rest of our lives. And we couldn't see really a bright future until we started feeling everyone's love, and we thought, we can get through this. We can do this.
Well, I know that you may not want to let the right hand know what the left hand's doing, but I'm going to give you guys a little shout out here for those who are not in Elko and who don't know, or who even are in Elko and just don't know you guys. But I think that one of the cool things about your story was it put into perspective for me how you got to see this outpouring of love from, all over the place, right? And especially from community members and everything. And now, fast forward these 30 years, you and your husband have opened up, quite a few businesses here in the area
Yeah.
that have not only provided for the community, right? The services that are definitely needed in this community. I know I am like a frequent flyer when it comes to heading to Big O Tires and to the car washes that you guys have.
Right.
I am there probably once a week or more.
Thank you for that. Thank you.
But well, and it's great. You guys have, I mean, you can just tell going into these businesses, you guys have amazing people who are working there. They're just kind and generous and really helpful, and they love being at their jobs. And so you've not only provided services for the community, but because you guys kept going through this, you guys have provided jobs for other people, right? And so I think that that's amazing to know that 30 years ago, the community was lifting you guys up, and now today you guys get an opportunity to lift the community up. And I know you guys do that in church too. You are like one of the most reliant people that I can count on when it comes to primary, and just showing up and being happy and taking on whatever it is that we throw at you. And I just think that you're amazing. I really do. I love your family. I know Tyrell. I'm going to mention Tyrell because I'm going to get him on the show at some point.
He'll be great. He needs to tell his story.
I heard he has a really good story.
He does, and
I know he was one of your.
He's one of our children that we've adopted in. Right? Yeah, he's one of our boys that we took in.
Yes, I love their family.
Yeah, my husband has been big on that self-reliant thing. We never wanted to get caught like that again, and A lot of businesses will wait till the end of the month to pay their bills. He paid our bills weekly. If
Mm,
we owed someone money, he'd pay, or sometimes even that day. And
wow.
just wanted to get us out of debt. I always felt like, so when you go to have a kidney transplant, insurance will not pay for it. And so I always felt like we need to have our home paid
Wow.
for or whatever, because we need to help this son of ours be able to afford. And they're like 300,000 now or more for their transplant.
Oh my
So those things were
goodness.
always weighing on us. And yeah,
Wow.
so we have and we've taught that self-reliant class that the church
Mm-hmm.
puts on, and um, have tried to live by those principles since that time, because it was a learning experience in so many ways. and
Yeah.
and for my husband financially, that was it was really tough to go through that.
Yeah, but it's amazing when you have faith and you do what's right, God will back you and he'll help you get through those hard times. Um, I've been there.
I agree 100%. Now, my husband will tell you this: there are good people that still have really hard trials and that are
Mhm.
doing everything they should be doing. Um, we've been blessed. I don't know. But but I agree with you. I feel like when you're trying to live the covenants, there's great promises the Lord has made us, um, and we're benefiting from those.
Well, and the blessings might not necessarily be
Right.
financial, but if you're trying to do what God asks
Yeah.
and keep the commandments, He will bless
Right.
your life.
Right.
And I have to remind myself that we continue to have trials with our children,
Mm-hmm.
with our grandchildren. There's trials that
Yeah,
just come up in life.
exactly.
So that's something we have to keep always working on. But that
Right.
one huge trial right at the beginning of our lives as adults really set the tone. And
Yeah. Yeah,
I'm
exactly.
thankful for trials. I don't want them poured on me, but I have seen I've seen my children go through hard trials and they just come out better.
Yeah, and I think the thing that turns that bitter situation into a better situation, like 100%, is when you turn to the Lord. I just like you, I've seen in my own family and friends of mine and stuff like that who they've come across some pretty tricky territories, some pretty hard trials and stuff, and
Yeah.
um instead of growing closer to Christ and to the gospel, they've just kind of blamed him, right?
Right.
Or decided that he wasn't showing up quick enough or whatever else, and they've left, and I look at their lives, and it like physically makes me so sad.
It does.
Like it makes me so sad. It breaks my heart to see where they're at, and they think that they're fine.
Yeah.
They think like everything's great, but
Yeah.
I see all of these blessings that are missing from their life, and it just hurts my heart so bad and just makes me want to be like, please just come back, just come back. Sometimes you can tell them, and sometimes you
You
just
can.
have to love them and try to keep showing them you know, how much peace can come into someone's life when
Yes.
when they have the
Yeah.
gospel right by their side and when they're, living the way that Christ would have them live. So,
Exactly. I think
oh.
well, my son Colton, I said, "Aren't you glad all those years we had family home meeting, family prayer?" And he said, "Honestly, Mom, I mean, it's good we had them, but it was how you and Dad lived your lives. We were watching, and that hit me hard. And I thought,
Mm,
you probably aren't the only one that has been watching." And so, you're right. That's sometimes all we can do is
yeah.
just be a living testimony, right, of Jesus Christ and the goodness that He can bring into our lives.
Well, Don Marie, this has been amazing. I love your story, and you've inspired me, and I'm sure you've inspired others that are watching this. Is there any last thoughts that you have before we wrap things up?
Well, the day Alicia asked me to share this, I had shared a sweet little story with my primary kids, and it's kind of a silly one, but my husband and I do have several businesses. We had a house full of teenagers. This was a few years ago. Um, He had big callings in the church, and we needed to just have a weekend away. Some of you can relate to that. So we went to California. We stayed at Huntington Beach, and we were walking along the ocean. And I said to my husband, I would love to find a sand dollar. I've never found a sand dollar on this ocean. I took 2 more steps, looked down, and there's a complete full sand dollar. And I never saw another one after that or before. And I have that sand dollar, and I put it in my bathroom on a little, it's kind of by my mirror that I get ready every morning. And it reminds me that, you know what? Our Heavenly Father and our Savior, Jesus Christ, they know us. They love us. They want us to be happy. And that's not just me. That's every one of us. And I know that to be true. And we're given trials, but we're also given ways to get out of those trials and to get through them and to come closer to our Savior.
He has so many extra steps already planned for our lives. He has so much that he's like just on the verge of like, oh, just hold on a little longer. Like, I promise, like, the reward is going to be amazing, right? Just keep going a little longer and just keep me by your side. I promise you, I promise you, I promise you. Just a little more. Just give me a little more and wait and see how amazing, your life can be for you if you just keep going. I think that that's awesome. And I love that you shared that with the kiddos.
That's right. It doesn't always turn out the way we want.
No, and I know for me, it's helped me a lot to stop putting expectations on my life. I know it sounds crazy, right? But I'm just kind of, and I've always felt like, oh, I'm so flighty. I'm so, I love this and I love that. And I've got like 50 things going on at any time because I'm a yes person too, right? Like I'm a yes girl too. And,
right.
But I think, you know what? Everything that I've done, I've grown, I've built relationships from, I've had these amazing experiences that's opened these doors for me to go and do other things that I never imagined I'd be doing a podcast. I never really thought that I would be serious about writing a book. I never thought I'd be living in Elko. Let's just say I never thought I'd like living in Elko. This is the really weird thing. Scott knows when I first moved here.
Most people, that's true.
It has been such a different experience.
I knew no other, so I was okay.
Yeah.
It's the Wild West still.
It really is. I have not seen a brothel yet. I know that they exist here. I haven't seen one.
They're there. Yeah.
But I was offered some drugs when I was doing laundry on like my first week here in a laundromat. So that was fun.
There's a lot of missionary work in Elko, Nevada. That's right.
Oh, nice. Good positive spin there.
There you go. But hey, you know what? Elko has gotten to the point where we are finally getting a temple. So for those listening who don't know, we are getting a temple and we are all super excited about it. It's just like minutes away from my door. I'm thrilled. So part of that is from the Petersen family. I know you guys were here long enough to do a lot of work and I appreciate it.
Well, thank you. We do love it here and trying to become a Zion people here in Elko, Nevada. That's important.
Well, God obviously wants that to happen or he wouldn't be building the temple there. So
I think you're right.
Well, thanks again, DawnMarie, for coming on and having the courage to share your story. Really appreciate it. Very inspiring. And thank you all for joining us today on our podcast. And if anyone else has a story that they'd like to share, please go to latterdaylights.com and tell us about your story so that we can get you on the show. It would be really fun to be able to continue to hear more people's stories and share some more light in the world.
Absolutely. And I promise you, DawnMarie, you can attest to it. It's not that scary once you get on here, right?
Right. And that I credit that to the two of you. So thank you for helping me through that.
Well, you're welcome. We appreciate it. So yes, please definitely, guys, reach out to us. We are always in need of new stories, new experiences, new ways to help grow people's testimonies and and inspire them to, live a little closer to our Savior Jesus Christ. So make sure, if you guys have listened and you loved this episode, please comment, share, go to our social medias. We're on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and all those things. You can like us, subscribe to us on YouTube. The more that we can get these stories out here, the more the gospel can grow, the stronger, we can become in the gospel. And that just helps the entire world, right? It helps our communities, it helps our families, it helps the world. So we really appreciate you guys for tuning in. DawnMarie, we thank you again for, being a yes girl and jumping on this podcast with us. If you guys need anything from us, you have any questions or comments, please reach out. Scott and I would love to be able to talk with you guys. Until then, we will see you guys next time.
Take care.